Our text for today, one verse from the book of Romans chapter 1, verse 16. Paul says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first, and also for the Greek." And may God bless the reading and delivering of His Word today. About a month ago, on April the 6th to be exact, the well-known country music singer named Merle Haggard passed away. And among the many hits he had during his long career was a song he put out in 1969 entitled, "I Take a Lot of Pride in What I Am." And in the song, Mr. Haggard sang, "The fat I'm chewing didn't take a lot of doing. Where I've been or where I'm going didn't take a lot of knowing. I never been nobody's idol, but at least I got a title, and I take a lot of pride in what I am." Well, when it comes to taking pride in people and things, we all do it. And that's okay if we take it in the right way, to the right degree, for the right reason. For example, we take pride in our families and friends. We take pride in our country, our community, and hopefully you take pride in your church. We take pride in our occupation and our education. We take pride in our possessions and properties, our achievements, our accomplishments, and our awards. We take pride in our favorite athletic teams, athletes, entertainers, candidates. And we could go on and on and on, for the list of things we take pride in never comes to an end. But in our text verse for today, the Apostle Paul tells us what he takes a lot of pride in, and that is the gospel of Christ. I join with Paul in taking a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ. And today, for a few moments, I want to give you some of the reasons why I do so. I take a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ because of its source. The source, of course, of the gospel of Christ is God Himself. This gospel is not the brainchild of some angel up in heaven. This gospel is not the ideal of some biblical hero. This gospel is not the invention of some human genius with a high IQ. Oh no. This gospel is the brainchild, the ideal, and the invention of God Himself. This gospel was not recommended to God by some commission or council that had done a study on it. This gospel was not passed into law by some legislative body and placed on God's desk for Him to sign into law. This gospel was not ruled by some high court to be legal and then God given the duty to enforce it. This gospel was not given to God as a petition by a lot of names signed on it, some living, some not living. The gospel was not advised to God by some agent or aide for Him to adopt. The gospel was not pushed on to God by a group of loud, rowdy protesters. And this gospel was not promoted to God by some opinion poll or some ad agency on Madison Avenue. No. This gospel came straight from the head and heart of God and God alone. And because He is the source of this gospel, I take a lot of pride in this gospel. Second reason I take a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ is its subject. The subject or object of this gospel is sinful mankind. And that's me. And that's you. For sinful mankind is the kind of man and woman each of us are. The subject of this gospel is not the economy of our world or Wall Street. The subject of this gospel is not the health care or the hunger of our world. The subject of this gospel is not the education or the learning of our world. The subject of this gospel is not the climate or the environment of our world. The subject of this gospel is not even the peace or the war of our world. Now, all of those are very important, but that's not what the gospel of Christ is all about. The gospel of Christ is all about me and my sin. The gospel of Christ is all about Mike Rhodes and his need of a Savior. Here I am. I am unknown and unheard of by 99.99999% of the world's population. And yet, me, little old me, is the subject of the gospel of Christ. And the same is true for you. Now, that's something to be proud about, folks. And that's why I'm proud of the gospel of Christ. Third reason I take a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ is its strength. Look at the strength of this gospel. Paul says it is the power of God to salvation. This gospel is so strong that it has the power to save me from all of my sins. I don't have the power to save myself or anyone else from a single one of their sins. My family or friends don't have the power to save me from my sin. My community, my country doesn't have the power to save me from my sin. My banker, my doctor, my lawyer, my accountant, they don't have the power to save me from my sin. All those brave men and women who protect me in the military and the law enforcement field, they don't have the power to save me from my sin. Any teacher or preacher I ever had doesn't have the power to save me from my sin. No angel, no Old Testament prophet, no New Testament disciple has the power to save me from my sin. But this gospel does have that power. It has the strength to save me from my sin. And when it comes to strength to doing things in life, do you know what it takes more strength to do than anything else? It takes more strength to save a person from their sin. And this gospel has that strength. And because God uses this gospel and its strength to save me from my sin, I take a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ. I also take a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ because of its scope. Look at the scope of people this gospel is available and accessible to. Paul says it is for everyone. Everyone includes little old me, and everyone includes little old you. And folks, I'm so glad and so grateful that this gospel is not just available to just certain ones, to just some ones, to just several ones, to just many ones, to just most ones, to just a bunch of ones, to just all ones but one. Because if that was the case, I might be that one, or you might be that one. But no, this gospel is offered and open to anyone and everyone. In the scopes of man, be it a telescope, microscope, or rifle scope, I'm not in the scope. I'm out of reach and out of range, out of sight and out of mind. But when it comes to God's gospel of Christ, I'm right in His crosshairs. I'm right in His range and reach. I'm right in His sight and scope. I'm right in His head and His heart. And because I am, I take a lot of pride in this gospel of Christ. And then I take a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ because of its standard. For me to have and know the salvation this gospel offers, what do I have to do? What is the standard that I have to meet and attain? Paul tells us it is for everyone who believes. To believe in Jesus Christ for the salvation of one's soul from their sin. That's the requirement of the gospel of Christ. And I'm so glad it is. I'm so glad the standard of this gospel is not based on my race of skin or my face of looks. I'm so glad this gospel is not based on the health of my body or the wealth of my bucks. I'm so glad this gospel is not based on my family tree or my circle of friends. That it's not based on my level of education or my skill of occupation. That it's not based on my nationality or name. I'm so glad for that. Because you see, folks, there are many standards in life that I cannot meet and attain. In fact, there are very few standards in life I can meet. If you don't believe me, ask my wife. She'll tell you. I do good to chew gum and walk at the same time. But let me tell you what this old country boy can do. I can believe in Jesus Christ. I can believe in Jesus Christ. I can meet the standard of this gospel. I can believe in Him to save me from my sins, and that's exactly what I do, and that's exactly what anyone can do. And because that's the standard set by this gospel, I take a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ. No, I've never been nobody's idol, but at least I got a title, and I take a lot of pride in what I am. Now, the title Mr. Haggard was referring to in his song, I have no idea. I don't know what he's referring to. You may, I don't. But let me tell you the title I'm referring to. It's the only title that matters and counts. It's the title of Christian. Christian. I don't care what you've got in front of your name. I don't care what you've got behind your name. I don't care what you've got in the middle of your name. The only title that matters and counts in the end is Christian. And it's because of this gospel that gives us the opportunity and the chance to be a Christian. That's the reason I take a lot of pride in the gospel of Christ. The title of Christian. Is this your title? Is this your title? I hope it is. I hope every one of you here today goes by the title of Christian. But if there's someone here today and you don't go by that title because you've never accepted what Jesus did for you on the cross, you can change that. You can leave here today with the title. Again, the only title that counts, the title of Christian.